They cast me aside on the night the snow began to fall, in front of every gilded face that mattered in London society. I stood there in my cream silk gown, a ring still warm in my gloved hand, and watched Thomas Hartley turn his back on me to kneel before another woman. I remember the hush that fell over the grand parlor of the Ashford estate, the way the candlelight seemed to flicker in sympathy or mockery. I could not tell which. The Yuletide introduction was meant to be my triumph, the formal presentation of our engagement before 200 guests. But Thomas had other plans. He had found someone better, someone whose father owned coal mines and shipping fleets, someone whose dowry could restore his crumbling family name without the taint of scandal that clung to mine. My father had been a dreamer, an investor in failed ventures, and he left me nothing but debts and a reputation too fragile to survive this humiliation. I felt every eye upon me as I curtsied, as I smiled with a grace I did not feel, as I whispered my congratulations to the blushing Miss Claudia Pemberton, who now wore the future I had believed was mine. Then I walked through that silent crowd, with my head high and my heart shattering into pieces no surgeon could ever mend. The whispers began before I reached the door. Spinster, they would call me now, cast aside, unworthy. I was 24 years old, and my life was over before it had truly begun. The snow was falling harder when I fled into the night, my cloak barely fastened, my gloves still clutching that useless ring. I walked without direction through the streets of Mayfair, then beyond, into the outskirts where the grand houses gave way to simpler dwellings, and finally to the emptiness of winter fields. My tears froze on my cheeks. My breath came in ragged clouds. I did not care where I went, only that I could not go back. It was the child who found me, or perhaps I found her. She appeared like a ghost in the swirling snow, a small figure in a threadbare coat, her face pale and luminous beneath a knitted cap. She could not have been more than 8 years old, yet there was something knowing in her eyes, something that made me stop in my aimless wandering. She smiled at me, a strange, gentle smile that seemed to understand everything I had just endured. She did not speak. She simply reached out one small hand and gestured for me to follow, then turned and walked into the snow. I followed because I had no strength left to resist, no reason to return to the life that had rejected me. We walked together through the frozen landscape, past bare hedgerows and abandoned orchards, until we came to a property I had never seen before. It stood alone on a hill, surrounded by an iron fence, its windows mostly dark except for one on the upper floor, where a golden light burned steadily. The child stopped at the gate and pointed toward the house. Then, before I could thank her or ask her name, she turned and disappeared into the swirling snow. I called after her, but she was gone, leaving only footprints that were already being covered by fresh snowfall. I stood there shivering, uncertain whether to approach or to turn back. But the light in the window drew me forward, a promise of warmth in a world that had gone cold. I pushed through the gate and walked up the path, my boots crunching on untouched snow. The house was grand, but neglected, its facade marked by years of isolation. When I reached the front door, I raised my hand to knock, and before my knuckles touched the wood, the door swung open. A man stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the warm glow of oil lamps within. He was tall and lean, dressed in shirt sleeves and a waistcoat despite the cold, his dark hair disheveled. He stared at me with eyes that were storm gray and startlingly direct, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, he said, "You should not be here." His voice was low and rough, not unkind, but weighted with some private burden. "This house is not a refuge for lost travelers." I lifted my chin, drawing on the last reserves of dignity I possessed. "A child led me here," I said, my voice trembling only slightly. She seemed to think I belonged. Something flickered across his face, too quick to name. He glanced past me into the snow, searching perhaps for the small figure who had brought me to his door, but she was nowhere to be seen. When his gaze returned to me, I saw him truly notice my appearance for the first time. My fine gown ruined by snow and flight, my hair escaping its pins, my face surely marked by tears and cold. "You are hurt," he said, though it was not a question. "Not in any way you can see," I replied, and the words came out more honestly than I intended. "But yes, I am hurt." He hesitated, and I thought he would send me away, back into the night where I belonged. Instead, he stepped aside and gestured into the warmth of the house. "Come in, then," he said quietly, "before you freeze. But I warn you, this house keeps secrets that are not easily understood." I crossed the threshold into a world I did not yet comprehend, leaving behind the life that had rejected me and stepping towards something I could not name. The door closed behind me with a soft click, shutting out the snow and the cold and the cruel judgment of the society that had cast me aside. The man who had opened it for me studied me with an intensity that should have frightened me, but instead made me feel, for the first time in hours, truly seen. "I am Eleanor Ashford," I said, removing my sodden gloves with hands that shook. "Julian Marlowe," he replied, and did not offer his hand or any other gesture of conventional politeness. Instead, he said, "The child who brought you here. She comes and goes as she pleases. I cannot predict when she will appear, but she has never led anyone astray. If she brought you to my door, she had a reason." "Is she your daughter?" I asked. "Yes," he said, and there was such complexity in that single word that I knew there was far more to the story than he would tell a stranger. "Her name is Catherine. She is the reason for everything I do, everything I have built here. But that is not a tale for tonight. You need warmth and rest before you hear the truth of this place." He led me deeper into the house, past furniture shrouded in dust covers and walls lined with books. We climbed a narrow staircase, and he showed me to a room on the second floor, simply furnished but clean, with a fire already burning in the grate as if he had been expecting me. "Rest," he said from the doorway. "Tomorrow, if you choose to stay, I will show you why Catherine brought you here. But tonight, you need only know that you are safe." I wanted to ask more, wanted to understand the mystery of this house and the man who inhabited it, but exhaustion overwhelmed me. I nodded, and he left, closing the door softly behind him. I changed out of my ruined gown and climbed into the bed, listening to the sounds of the old house settling around me. And beneath it all, so faint I thought I might be imagining it, I heard a rhythmic ticking sound, steady and mechanical, like the heartbeat of some great machine. I slept deeply that night, more peacefully than I had in months, and dreamed of snowfall and golden light, and a child who smiled, as if she knew secrets the rest of us had forgotten. In the morning, I found Julian in a room on the upper floor, a space that defied all expectation. It was a workshop filled with tools and instruments of brass and steel, with diagrams drawn in meticulous ink, with pieces of machinery that gleamed in the morning light. But it was the device in the center of the room that captured my attention and would not release it. It sat on a pedestal, intricate and beautiful, a construction of metal and glass that pulsed with a soft, rhythmic light. It looked almost alive, and as I stepped closer, I realized what I was hearing, the steady, measured beat of a human heart. Julian stood beside it, his hands in his pockets, watching me with careful attention. "This is what I do," he said simply. "I build hearts. Mechanical hearts that do not fail, do not weaken, do not break under the weight of sorrow or time. I am trying to do what medicine says is impossible." I stared at the beautiful, terrible device, feeling something shift inside me. "Why?" I whispered. He was silent for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was raw with emotion he usually kept hidden. "Because my daughter needs one," he said. "Catherine is ill. Her heart is failing, and the doctors have given her little time. They say there is nothing to be done, that I should accept the inevitable. But I cannot. I will not. So I am building her a future, piece by piece, gear by gear. I am refusing to let her go." I looked at him standing there in the morning light, this man who would not surrender to fate, who fought against death itself with nothing but his brilliant mind and stubborn love. And I understood suddenly why the child had led me here. She had recognized something in me that I had not yet seen in myself, the capacity to believe in impossible things, to fight for what mattered even when the world said it was hopeless. "Can you truly do this?" I asked. "Can you save her?" Julian Marlowe met my eyes, and I saw in his gaze both the answer and the question that would bind us together. "I am trying," he said, and I believe with enough time and dedication I will succeed. But the work is lonely, Eleanor. The world does not understand what I am attempting. They would call it blasphemy, madness, defiance of God's will. I have no one to share this burden with, no one who believes as I do that love can overcome even death. He did not ask me to stay. He did not need to. I looked at the mechanical heart beating steadily on its pedestal, thought of the child who had led me through the snow, remembered the society that had cast me aside and deemed me worthless. And I made my choice. Then let me help you, I said. Let me be the one who believes with you. Something changed in his expression, a softening of the careful guard he kept around his heart. You do not know what you are offering, he said quietly. If you stay here, if you help me with this work, society will condemn you even more thoroughly than they already have. Your reputation will be destroyed beyond repair. I lifted my chin and met his gaze steadily. My reputation was destroyed the night I was cast aside, I said. I have nothing left to lose, Mr. Marlowe, and everything to gain by staying here and helping you save your daughter. If you will have me. He studied my face for a long moment, and then slowly, he smiled. It was the first time I had seen him smile, and it transformed him completely, revealing the warmth and hope he kept hidden beneath his serious exterior. Then stay, he said. Please, Eleanor, stay. And so I did, stepping fully into a life I had never imagined, bound to a man and a mission that would change everything. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the world in white silence. Inside, surrounded by the warmth of impossible dreams, I stood beside Julian Marlowe and felt for the first time since Thomas had turned away from me that I might yet have a reason to hope. I did not leave that night, nor the night after. Julian Marlowe did not ask me to stay, but neither did he send me away. And in the silence between those two possibilities, I found a strange kind of refuge. The room he had given me became mine, and each morning I would wake to the sound of the house coming alive around me, the creak of old wood, the whisper of wind against the windows, and from somewhere below, the steady mechanical heartbeat of his impossible creation. In those first days, I came to understand the rhythms of that household. Julian worked long hours in his workshop, his concentration absolute as he perfected the device that might save his daughter's life. I rarely saw Catherine during the day. Julian explained that she rested most of the time, conserving her strength, and that she preferred the quiet solitude of her room, where she could read and dream without the demands of the outside world. It was better that way, he said, until the mechanical heart was ready. Better that she preserve what vitality she had left. I made myself useful in ways that felt natural. I prepared meals that Julian forgot to eat, organized his scattered notes and diagrams, cleaned the neglected corners of the house that had accumulated years of dust. It was not the life I had been raised for, but it was purposeful in a way my previous existence had never been. And each evening, when Julian permitted it, I returned to the workshop to watch him work. He was magnificent in his element, this man who had opened his door to a stranger on a snowy night. His hands moved with precision and grace as he assembled pieces of machinery so delicate they seemed like jewelry. He explained his work to me in a voice that grew animated when he spoke of pressure valves and synchronized chambers, of steam power harnessed to replicate the exact rhythm of human circulation. I understood perhaps half of what he said, but I understood completely the passion that drove him, the refusal to accept defeat that burned in his storm-gray eyes. The heart is merely a pump, he told me one evening, as we stood together watching his creation pulse with steady light. Medicine treats it as something mystical, but it is mechanical in nature. Blood must move through the body in a precise rhythm, delivering life to every extremity. If I can replicate that function with gears and chambers, if I can create something that will not tire or fail, then there is hope. That is all I ask for. Hope. You are giving Catherine more than hope, I said softly. You are giving her a future. He turned to look at me, and something in his expression made my breath catch. You speak of her as if you care, he said, and there was wonder in his voice. You have barely met her, yet you say her name with tenderness. She brought me here, I replied. She looked at me in the snow and saw something worth saving. How could I not care for a child with such wisdom? Julian's hand moved as if to reach for mine, then stopped, suspended in the space between us. "Eleanor," he said, my name rough on his tongue, "you should know that the society you came from will never forgive you for staying here. They will assume the worst. They will call you my mistress, my accomplice in whatever dark practices they imagine I perform. Your reputation, what remains of it, will be utterly destroyed." I looked at him standing there in his shirt sleeves, his dark hair falling across his forehead, his expression filled with warning and something else I was only beginning to recognize. Behind him, the mechanical heart pulsed with its steady rhythm, a promise made in metal and determination. "Let them assume what they will," I said, lifting my chin. "I have learned that reputation is worth nothing if the life it protects is empty. Here, in this house, I have purpose. I have work that matters. And I have found someone who sees me not as a failed marriage prospect, but as a person of value. That is worth more than all the society invitations in London." Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the careful armor he had built around himself. He closed the distance between us in 2 steps, his hand finally completing the gesture it had begun, taking mine and holding it with a gentleness that belied his strength. "You are remarkable," he said quietly. "Thomas Hartley was a fool to let you go." "No," I replied, my fingers tightening around his. "Thomas Hartley did me the greatest favor of my life when he cast me aside. If he had not, I would never have walked into the snow. I would never have followed Catherine to your door. I would never have found this, whatever this is between us." Julian's other hand came up to cup my face, his thumb tracing the line of my cheekbone. "What is this between us, Eleanor?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I am a man obsessed with an impossible task, isolated from the world, consumed by the need to save my daughter. I have nothing to offer you but hardship and scandal, and the company of someone who has forgotten how to live in ordinary ways. Yet I find myself wanting to offer you everything." My heart raced with a longing I had never felt for Thomas, never felt for anyone. "Then offer it," I whispered. "Julian, offer me everything, and I will stay and build this strange life with you." He kissed me then, and it was nothing like the chaste, proper kisses I had exchanged with my former fiancé. It was desperate and tender and filled with the recognition of 2 people who had found each other against all odds. When we finally pulled apart, both of us breathless, I rested my forehead against his chest and listened to the steady beat of his human heart, so different from the mechanical perfection of the device he had created. "I am falling in love with you," Julian said into my hair. "I did not expect it. I did not plan for it. But here we are, and I cannot imagine this house without you in it anymore." "I am already in love with you," I replied, looking up at him. "I think I have been since the moment you opened the door and invited a ruined woman into your home without judgment or condition." Over the following weeks, we fell into a pattern that was both domestic and extraordinary. By day, I managed the household while Julian worked on the final adjustments to the mechanical heart. By night, we sat together by the fire in the parlor, talking about everything and nothing, sharing the stories of our lives and dreams for the future. He told me about his late wife, Catherine's mother, who had died when their daughter was only 3 years old. He told me about the years of isolation that had followed, the way he had thrown himself into his work to escape the grief. And I told him about my father's failed investments, about the social decline that had made me desperate enough to accept Thomas Hartley's proposal, about the humiliation of being cast aside in front of everyone who mattered. "They cast you aside," Julian said one evening, his arm around my shoulders as we watched the fire, "and delivered you to me. I should write Thomas Hartley a letter of thanks." I laughed, the sound genuine and free. "He would not understand it." "No," Julian agreed. "He would not. The loss is entirely his." Catherine remained largely in her rooms during those weeks, and on the rare occasions when I saw her, she would smile at me with that knowing expression and disappear like morning mist. Julian said she was saving her strength, that she understood what was coming and was preparing herself in her own way. I did not press to spend time with her. Something told me that she had brought us together for a reason, and that reason was not yet complete. The mechanical heart neared completion. Julian worked longer hours, his movements precise and urgent, driven by a father's desperate love. I stood beside him as much as he would allow. learning the names of tools, holding instruments steady, asking questions that helped him clarify his own thinking. We were becoming partners in every sense of the word, bound together by purpose and passion, and the impossible dream we were trying to make real. One night, very late, after Julian had finally left the workshop exhausted, I returned alone to look at the completed mechanical heart. It sat on its pedestal, glowing softly in the lamplight, every gear and valve perfectly calibrated. It was beautiful and terrible at once, a testament to human brilliance and a challenge to the natural order. I placed my hand near it and felt the faint warmth it generated, heard the steady rhythm that would soon beat inside a child's chest. "It is finished," Julian's voice came from the doorway, making me turn. He looked exhausted but triumphant, his eyes bright with emotion. "Tomorrow I will begin the final preparations. The procedure must happen soon. Catherine cannot wait much longer." I crossed to him and took his hands. "You are going to save her," I said, with a certainty I did not entirely feel. "You have worked miracles already, Julian. This will be your greatest." He pulled me close, holding me as if I were the only solid thing in a shifting world. "I am terrified," he admitted against my hair. "What if I fail? What if all of this has been for nothing?" "Then you will have tried," I said firmly. "You will have fought for her with everything you have. That is all any father can do. That is all any of us can do when we love someone. We fight, and we hope, and we refuse to surrender." He kissed the top of my head, and I felt him draw strength from my presence, felt the terror ease slightly in his embrace. "Stay with me tomorrow," he said, "when I perform the procedure. I know it will be difficult to witness, but I need you there. I need to know that someone believes in me, that someone understands what I am trying to do. I will be there," I promised, "every moment. I will not leave you to face this alone." We stood together in the workshop, surrounded by the tools and dreams of months of desperate work, and I knew that everything was about to change. Tomorrow, Julian would attempt the impossible. He would open his daughter's chest and replace her failing heart with metal and gears and brilliant, audacious hope. And I would stand beside him, this man I had come to love more than I thought possible. This man who had shown me that being cast aside was not an ending, but a beginning. The mechanical heart beat on, steady and sure, counting down the hours until we would discover whether love and science together could truly work miracles. I did not know if we would succeed. I did not know what tomorrow would bring. But I knew that I had found my place in this world, standing beside a man who refused to accept defeat, fighting for a future that everyone else said was impossible. And that, I thought, as Julian led me from the workshop toward the warmth of the house, was worth more than all the comfortable certainties I had lost. The day Julian chose for the procedure arrived with a gray dawn that promised snow. I woke to find him already gone from the house, preparing in ways I could not witness and did not fully understand. He had explained the night before that the work he must do required absolute concentration, that he could not afford any distraction, no matter how well-meaning. He asked me, gently but firmly, to remain in the house while he worked, to trust him to do what must be done. I agreed, though every instinct in me wanted to be by his side. But I understood that this was his burden to carry, his daughter's life balanced on the edge of his skill and determination. Some things a father must face alone, and I had to respect that boundary, even as it tore at my heart to be excluded. So I waited. I spent the morning in the parlor, unable to read or occupy myself with any useful task. I paced the floors, watched the snow begin to fall, and prayed to a God I was not certain listened to desperate women who loved men society would call mad. The hours stretched endlessly, each minute an eternity of not knowing whether Julian was succeeding or watching his daughter slip away despite everything he had built. It was well past midnight when I finally heard the door to the workshop open. I rushed into the hallway to find Julian standing there, his shirt sleeves rolled up, his face gray with exhaustion, but his eyes bright with tears that might have been joy or relief or both. He looked at me, and I saw in that gaze everything I needed to know. "She is alive," he said, his voice breaking on the words. "Eleanor, she is alive. The heart is beating. It is working exactly as I designed it. She is sleeping now, recovering. But she is alive. I ran to him, and he caught me in his arms, holding me so tightly I could barely breathe. We stood together in that hallway, both of us shaking with the release of tension we had carried for so long, and I felt tears streaming down my face. He had done it. Against all reason, all medical certainty, all natural law, Julian Marlowe had saved his daughter's life. "I knew you would succeed," I whispered against his chest. "I never doubted you." "I doubted myself every moment," he admitted, his hands trembling as they held me. "But I kept hearing your voice in my mind, telling me that love was enough, that fighting was enough. You gave me the strength to continue when my hands wanted to fail." Over the following days, I learned that miracles require patience. Julian would not let me see Catherine immediately, explaining that she needed time to heal, to adjust to the mechanical heart that now sustained her life. He spent hours at her bedside, monitoring every aspect of her recovery with the same meticulous attention he had given to building the device itself, and gradually, carefully, he began to report improvements. Her color was returning. Her breathing was easier. The heart was performing flawlessly. 2 weeks after the procedure, Julian finally told me that Catherine was asking for me. I climbed the stairs to her room with my heart pounding, uncertain what I would find. When I opened the door, I saw her sitting up in bed, a book open on her lap, looking almost exactly as she had the first night I arrived, except for the faint bandages visible at the collar of her nightgown. She looked up at me and smiled, that same knowing smile she had given me in the snow, and said, "Miss Eleanor, Papa said you have been very worried about me." I crossed to her bedside and took her hand gently. "I have been," I admitted. "You are very precious to me, Catherine, though we have spent little time together. You brought me to this house, and in doing so, you changed my life completely." "I know," she said simply, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "I saw you that night in the snow, and I knew you were the one. Papa needed someone to believe in him, someone to stand beside him, and you needed somewhere to belong. It seemed obvious to me that you should come here." I marveled at the wisdom in this child, at the understanding that seemed beyond her years. "How do you feel?" I asked. "Does it hurt?" She placed her hand over her chest, where beneath the bandages and skin, the mechanical heart beat with its steady, tireless rhythm. "It feels strange," she said honestly. "Different from before, but stronger too. Papa says I will never grow tired like I used to, that I can run and play and live a whole long life now. I think it is worth feeling strange for that." "Your father loves you very much," I said, my throat tight with emotion. "I know," Catherine replied. "And he loves you too. I can tell by the way he says your name. You make him happy, Miss Eleanor. You make him remember how to smile." I stayed with her for an hour, reading from her book and talking about simple things, and when I finally left her room, I felt as if a weight had lifted from my shoulders. She was truly going to be well. The mechanical heart was more than a theoretical triumph. It was a living, breathing miracle that had given this remarkable child a future she had almost lost. That evening, I found Julian in the parlor staring into the fire, a glass of brandy in his hand that he had barely touched. I sat beside him, and he immediately put his arm around me, pulling me close. "She looks well," I said, "better than I dared hope." "The heart is functioning perfectly," Julian replied, but there was tension in his voice that worried me. "Every measurement, every indicator suggests that it will continue to do so indefinitely. But Eleanor, we must be cautious now. No one can know what I have done. If word spreads, if people learn that I have replaced my daughter's heart with a mechanical device, there will be consequences I cannot predict. The medical establishment will condemn me. The church will call me a heretic. We could lose everything." I took his hand and squeezed it firmly. "Then we tell no one," I said. "Catherine has recovered from a serious illness through rest and your devoted care. That is the story we will tell, and it is not entirely untrue. The specifics of her cure are no one's business but ours." Julian turned to look at me, his gray eyes searching my face. "You understand what you are committing to?" he asked. "A lifetime of guarding this secret, of living with the knowledge that one careless word could destroy us? I am asking you to share this burden with me, Eleanor. I am asking you to be my partner, not just in love, but in protecting Catherine from a world that would not understand what I have given her. I understand completely, I replied without hesitation, and I choose to stay. I choose this life, this family, this beautiful secret we will guard together. Julian, you saved Catherine's life. You refused to surrender to fate. How could I do any less? I will stand beside you, and we will protect her together. He cupped my face in his hands and kissed me with a tenderness that made my heart ache. Marry me, he said when we finally pulled apart. Not someday, but soon. Let me make you my wife before God and law. Let me give you the security of my name and the promise of my future. You deserve that, Eleanor. You deserve everything I can offer you. Yes, I said, the word simple and certain. Yes, Julian, I will marry you. We were wed in early spring, in the same small chapel where we had first spoken of marriage in hypothetical terms. The ceremony was private, attended only by the vicar and Catherine, who stood beside us with her face glowing with health and happiness. When Julian slipped the ring onto my finger and spoke his vows, I felt the final pieces of my broken heart fall into place. I was no longer the woman who had been cast aside at the Yuletide introduction. I was Eleanor Marlowe, wife to a brilliant man, mother to a miraculous child, guardian of a secret that proved love could overcome even death itself. The weeks following our marriage were the happiest I had ever known. Catherine grew stronger every day, running through the gardens with an energy she had never possessed before. The mechanical heart beat on without faltering, a constant reminder of what Julian had accomplished. And Julian himself seemed to shed years of worry and isolation, his smiles coming easier, his laughter ringing through the house in ways I suspected it had not since his first wife died. We settled into the rhythms of married life, and I discovered that being a wife and mother suited me far better than being a society lady ever had. I managed the household with a competence that surprised me, hosted the occasional visit from village neighbors with grace, and spent my evenings beside my husband, discussing everything from literature to science to the small domestic details that make up a life. But happiness, as I was learning, always comes with the shadow of potential loss, and our happiness was built on a secret that society would never forgive if they discovered it. We lived with that knowledge always, the understanding that one wrong word, one careless revelation, could bring everything crashing down around us. The threat arrived sooner than we expected, in the form of whispers and speculation that reached even our isolated household. People in the village had noticed Catherine's remarkable recovery. They wondered at the child who had been dying and was now the picture of health. Some attributed it to prayer and divine intervention. Others suggested that Julian must have discovered some new medical treatment, some secret knowledge that he was keeping from the world. And a few, the suspicious and superstitious few, whispered darker theories about unnatural practices and defiance of God's will. Julian grew tense as the speculation increased, spending long hours in his workshop not working, but thinking, planning how we might respond if questions became accusations. And I, who had once moved easily through society's drawing rooms, found myself watching every word I spoke, careful to present a picture of normalcy and respectability that would deflect suspicion from the truth we guarded. We were walking a knife's edge between triumph and disaster, and we both knew it. But we held on to each other, and on to Catherine, determined to protect what we had built no matter what storms might come. I had been cast aside by one life and found another, and I would not let anyone take this precious, impossible family away from me. Society came calling on a cold February morning in the form of a carriage bearing a crest I recognized with a sinking heart. It belonged to Lady Constance Pemberton, mother of the woman who had taken my place at Thomas Hartley's side. She was one of London's most formidable matrons, and her arrival could mean nothing good. Julian was in his study when she knocked, and I was the one who opened the door. Lady Pemberton swept past me without invitation, her critical gaze taking in my simple dress, my unpinned hair, the domestic comfort I had settled into so completely. Behind her came her lady's maid, and to my shock, Thomas Hartley himself. I had not seen him since that terrible night at the Yuletide introduction. He looked uncomfortable and slightly ashamed, his eyes darting away from mine as he removed his hat. Lady Pemberton, however, showed no such discomfort. "Miss Ashford," she said, her voice dripping with false civility. Or should I say, Mrs. Marlowe now? How quickly you have landed on your feet after your unfortunate disgrace. We have come on a matter of some delicacy. I lifted my chin, feeling anger flare in my chest. I was not aware my marriage was any concern of yours, Lady Pemberton. Everything that affects society's moral fabric is my concern, she replied coldly. Rumors have reached London about this household. Whispers of strange practices, unnatural recoveries. Your stepdaughter was said to be dying, yet now she runs through the gardens like any healthy child. Some find this miraculous recovery rather suspicious. There are those who suggest your husband practices methods that defy both medical ethics and God's will. That is absurd, I said, my hands clenching into fists. Dr. Marlowe is a man of science and honor. His daughter recovered through rest, proper nutrition, and devoted care. There is nothing sinister in a father nursing his child back to health. Thomas finally found his voice, stepping forward with an expression of painful earnestness. Eleanor, please understand. Lady Pemberton has connections with the Royal College of Physicians. If there are questions about unconventional treatments, it would be better to address them now, openly, before speculation grows into something more dangerous. I came today hoping to help you avoid further scandal. I stared at him. This man who had destroyed me without a second thought and now presumed to protect me. We have nothing to hide, I said firmly. Catherine recovered naturally. My husband's only crime is being more devoted to his daughter's welfare than conventional doctors who would have given up on her. It was at that moment that Julian appeared in the hallway, his expression carefully controlled. I believe you have said quite enough, he said quietly. My wife is correct. My daughter's recovery, while remarkable, is not mysterious. Good care and time achieved what medicine had deemed impossible. It happens more often than the medical establishment cares to admit. Lady Pemberton's eyes narrowed. Then you would not object to a formal inquiry? The College of Physicians could send representatives to verify your claims. Surely, if everything is as innocent as you suggest, you have nothing to fear from professional scrutiny. I saw Julian's jaw tighten, saw the calculation in his eyes as he weighed the risks of refusing versus accepting. If he refused, it would appear he had something to hide. If he accepted, he risked everything we had built. Before he could answer, I stepped forward. We welcome any inquiry that will put these ridiculous rumors to rest, I said, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. Our family has nothing to hide, and we will be happy to demonstrate that Catherine's recovery was achieved through conventional means. I trust the College of Physicians will find your allegations as baseless as they are malicious, Lady Pemberton. Lady Pemberton's expression soured, but she could not refuse without appearing petty. Very well, she said. I will convey your cooperation to the appropriate authorities. Good day, Mrs. Marlowe. I hope for your sake that your confidence is not misplaced. When the door closed behind them, Julian turned to me with both admiration and concern in his eyes. That was either very brave or very foolish, he said quietly. We have just agreed to allow the medical establishment into our home. We had no choice, I replied, taking his hands. Refusal would have confirmed their suspicions. This way, we control the situation. We prepare, we present them with a healthy child and a respectable household, and we give them nothing to find fault with. Over the following weeks, we transformed the house into a model of Victorian respectability. Julian cleaned his workshop, removing any evidence that might suggest the true nature of his work. The mechanical heart that had saved Catherine's life was carefully hidden, its components scattered among other projects until it became invisible. We coached Catherine gently on what to say if anyone asked about her illness, teaching her to describe her recovery in vague terms that suggested natural healing. Catherine handled it all with remarkable composure. She was nearly 9 years old now, mature beyond her years, and she understood without being told that everything our family had built hung in the balance. When I worried that we were placing too much burden on her young shoulders, she would simply smile and say, I am stronger than I look, Mama Eleanor. Papa built me to last. The physicians arrived 3 weeks later, 3 stern-faced men who examined our home and our lives with professional skepticism. Julian guided them through his study and workshop, explaining his theoretical work in terms that suggested intellectual curiosity rather than practical application. I played the role of devoted wife and stepmother with a skill that surprised me, speaking of Catherine's illness in the past tense and her recovery as a testament to patience and faith. When they asked to see Catherine, I brought her to the parlor where she sat with perfect posture, answering their questions with the careful honesty we had practiced. Yes, she had been very ill. Yes, she had been weak and tired all the time. No, she did not remember any specific treatments, only that her father had cared for her devotedly, and gradually she had begun to feel better. She was polite, articulate, and gave them absolutely nothing they could use against us. The examination was brief and superficial. They listened to her chest through their stethoscopes, asked about her daily activities, observed her walking across the room. If they noticed anything unusual about the rhythm of her heartbeat, they attributed it to the natural variation of a healthy child. Their preconceptions worked in our favor. They expected to find either a dying child or evidence of quackery, and Catherine was so obviously healthy and well-adjusted that it undermined every suspicion they had arrived with. When they finally departed, declaring they had found nothing to support the allegations against Julian, I collapsed into a chair in the parlor, my hands shaking with the release of tension I had held for weeks. Julian sat beside me and pulled me into his arms. "You were magnificent," he whispered against my hair. "You saved us, Eleanor. Your courage and quick thinking protected our family." "We saved each other," I replied, holding him tightly. "That is what families do." That evening, as we sat together watching Catherine play in the garden, I reflected on how far I had come from that terrible night when I was cast aside at the Yuletide introduction. I had been deemed unworthy by society, rejected and humiliated in front of everyone who mattered. But that rejection had led me here, to this house, to this family, to a love deeper than anything I had imagined possible. Julian reached for my hand and squeezed it gently. "We are safe now," he said. "The inquiry is closed. Lady Pemberton has been proven wrong. We can finally breathe." I nodded, but I knew the truth. We would never be entirely safe. We would always carry this secret, always live with the knowledge that Catherine's life depended on a mechanical heart hidden beneath her skin. But we had proven we could protect that secret, could stand together against scrutiny and suspicion. Catherine ran across the garden toward us, her face flushed with exertion and joy, the mechanical heart in her chest beating steadily with every movement. She was alive and healthy and happy, and that was worth every risk, every moment of fear, every sacrifice we had made. "Mama Eleanor, Papa," she called, using the name she had started calling me shortly after our marriage. "Come see what I found in the hedge. I think it might be a bird's nest." Julian and I rose together and followed her across the garden, our hands still linked, our hearts bound by the secret we guarded and the love that had grown between us. The afternoon sun broke through the clouds, warming the cold February day, and for a moment everything felt perfect and right. We had been tested, and we had survived. We had built a family from broken pieces, created a life from impossible dreams. And though I knew challenges would come again, I also knew we would face them together, united by the fierce determination to protect what we had found. I was no longer Eleanor Ashford, the woman cast aside and deemed worthless. I was Eleanor Marlowe, wife and mother, guardian of miracles, partner to a man who refused to accept defeat. And that identity, forged in snow and secrets and stubborn love, was worth more than all the society approval I had lost. Spring arrived with a gentleness that felt like benediction. The gardens around our house burst into bloom, and Catherine spent her days exploring every corner of the grounds with the boundless energy of a child who had been given a second chance at life. She was growing taller, her face losing the pallor that had marked her illness, and when she laughed, the sound rang through the house like music. Julian and I settled into the comfortable rhythms of married life, and I discovered that happiness was not the grand, dramatic thing I had once imagined. It was quiet mornings drinking tea together while Catherine practiced her letters. It was evenings by the fire reading aloud, while the mechanical heart that had saved her life ticked softly in the background, a sound that had become as familiar as breathing. It was the thousand small moments that made up a life built on love and trust, and stubborn refusal to surrender to fate. The inquiry had been closed, the rumors put to rest, and our family was safe. Lady Pemberton had retreated into wounded pride, her accusations proven baseless. Thomas Hartley had married his heiress and moved to the countryside, and I heard his name mentioned only rarely, always with the distant indifference of someone who belonged to another life entirely. The society that had cast me aside had moved on to newer scandals, and we were left in blessed peace. Julian returned to his work, but with a different focus now. He documented his theories and designs carefully, creating detailed records that future generations might use to push the boundaries of medical science. But he never attempted another procedure like the one that had saved Catherine. That singular achievement remained our secret, protected and guarded with fierce devotion. One afternoon in late May, I found Julian in his study, staring at a letter with an expression I could not read. I crossed to his side and placed my hand on his shoulder. "What is it?" I asked gently. He handed me the letter without a word. It was from a colleague at the university, a scientist Julian had corresponded with for years. The letter spoke of Julian's theoretical work in glowing terms, invited him to present his ideas at a symposium in London, suggested that his innovations could revolutionize medicine if he would only share them more widely with the scientific community. "They want you to speak publicly about your work," I said, understanding immediately why this troubled him. "They want you to teach others what you have learned." "I cannot," Julian said quietly. "If I present my theories too thoroughly, if I explain exactly how the mechanical heart functions, someone will eventually realize that I have moved beyond theory into practice. They will start asking questions about Catherine, about her recovery. Everything we have protected could be exposed." I set the letter down and turned him to face me, taking both his hands in mine. "Then you tell them no," I said firmly. "Your greatest achievement is not the mechanical heart itself, Julian. It is Catherine. She is alive and healthy and happy because of what you did. That is enough. You do not owe the world your secrets if sharing them puts our daughter at risk." He pulled me into his arms and held me tightly. "How did I survive all those years without you?" he murmured against my hair. "You always know exactly what I need to hear." "We found each other when we needed to," I replied. "That is all that matters." Julian wrote his polite refusal to the university, citing family obligations and private research that could not yet be shared. And we continued our quiet life, grateful for the peace we had fought so hard to secure. Catherine flourished. By her 10th birthday, she was reading books far beyond her years, helping Julian with simple calculations in his workshop, learning from me how to manage a household. She never complained about the secret she carried, never seemed burdened by the knowledge that she was different from other children. Instead, she treated her mechanical heart as a gift, a source of strength rather than shame. "I am lucky," she told me one evening as I tucked her into bed. "Most children have hearts that might give out at any time. Mine never will. Papa made sure of that." I kissed her forehead and marveled at her wisdom. "You are indeed lucky," I agreed. "And so are we to have you." The years passed in gentle succession. Catherine grew into a lovely young woman, intelligent and kind, with her father's determination and a grace that was entirely her own. She attracted suitors eventually, and Julian and I faced the difficult question of what to tell potential husbands about her unique condition. In the end, Catherine made the decision herself. "I will tell them the truth," she said when she was 17, and being courted by a young doctor from the village. "If a man cannot accept what Papa did to save my life, if he cannot see it as the miracle it is, then he is not worthy of me." She told her suitor, and to our relief and joy, he accepted it completely. Dr. James Whitmore was a man of science himself, and he saw in Catherine's mechanical heart not an abomination, but a triumph of love and innovation. They were married the following spring, and I wept happy tears as I watched her walk down the aisle, this child who had led me through the snow to find my own happiness. Julian and I grew old together in that house on the hill, surrounded by the gardens Catherine had loved as a child, and the workshop where impossible dreams had been made real. His hair turned gray, and lines appeared around his eyes, but his mind remained sharp and his hands steady. He never stopped working, never stopped seeking ways to improve the human condition, though he was always careful never to risk the peace we had built. I, who who had once measured my worth by society's standards, learned to find value in simpler things. The love of a good man, the respect of a daughter who called me mother, the satisfaction of a life lived according to my own principles rather than someone else's expectations. The woman I had become bore little resemblance to the terrified girl who had fled into the snow that terrible night, and I was grateful for every moment of the transformation. On our 20th wedding anniversary, Julian took me to the workshop where we had first spoken of love and shared our first kiss. The mechanical heart he had built for Catherine sat on its pedestal once again, carefully maintained but no longer needed. Catherine wore a smaller, improved version now, designed by her husband with Julian's guidance, a device that would carry her through the rest of her long life. "Do you ever regret it?" Julian asked me as we stood together looking at that beautiful, terrible machine. "Staying here that first night? Binding yourself to a man society called mad? Giving up everything you might have had for this strange life we built together?" I turned to face him, this man I had loved for 2 decades, this brilliant, stubborn, wonderful person who had shown me what it meant to refuse surrender. "I regret nothing," I said firmly. "Thomas Hartley cast me aside, and it was the greatest gift he ever gave me. It brought me here, to you, to Catherine, to a life that has meaning beyond anything I imagined possible. If I could go back to that night and choose differently, I would make the same choice every time." He kissed me then, and it was as sweet and full of promise as our first kiss had been. Proof that love does not diminish with time, but deepens into something stronger and more precious. I am old now, my hair silver, and my hands marked by the passage of years. Julian has been gone these past 5 years, his brilliant mind finally at rest after a life spent pushing the boundaries of what was possible. But Catherine remains, a woman in her prime with children and grandchildren of her own. And in her chest, the mechanical heart still beats with the same perfect rhythm her father gave it more than 60 years ago. She comes to visit me often, bringing her family to the house where she grew up, telling her grandchildren stories about the grandfather who refused to accept defeat and the woman who was cast aside only to find her true home. And sometimes, when the house is quiet and I sit alone by the fire, I think about that night at the Yuletide introduction when Thomas Hartley turned his back on me and destroyed the life I thought I wanted. I should thank him, I suppose. His cruelty gave me the push I needed to walk into the snow, to follow a mysterious child to the door of a man who would become my everything. His rejection led me to acceptance, his dismissal to devotion, his cold calculation to the warmest love I have ever known. My name is Eleanor Marlowe, and this is the story of how being cast aside became my salvation. A child led me to an inventor who built machines to heal hearts, and in the process, he healed mine as well. He showed me that broken things can be remade, that love can overcome impossible odds, that refusing to surrender is sometimes the only way forward. I would not trade this life for all the society approval in London. I would not exchange the love I found for the comfortable future I lost, and I would walk through that snow again 1,000 times, following a child who knew better than I did where I truly belonged. The mechanical heart beats on, a testament to what can be achieved when love meets determination and refuses to accept defeat. And I, who was once deemed unworthy and cast aside, have lived a life beyond measure, filled with purpose and passion and the fierce joy of protecting those I hold dear. This is my story, this is my triumph, and I am grateful every day for the night I lost everything and found, in the loss, exactly what I had been searching for all along.